I'd like to call to order this committee whole meeting of the town of Saugeen Shores and extend a welcome to everyone in the chambers this evening. The first order of business is a declaration of pecuniary interest, and I'll remind every member of your responsibility to do so if you have one, and you can do it now or when it arises on the agenda. None noted. Then this evening we have two deputations, and the first is Mr. Jim Henning. He's here on behalf of the Southampton Residents Association. Welcome, Jim.
Oh, you want it on. Who we are. For the benefit of the new members of council, I'd like to provide a brief outline of Southampton Residents Association. SRA is the result of a 2002 amalgamation of the Southampton Beach Association and the Southampton Property Owners Association. This merger was in response to a need to create a larger critical mass organization that could more effectively act as a collective voice representing residents of Southampton Ward. Our current membership is 420 households throughout the ward and in adjacent sections of Saugeen Township Ward. 70% seasonal and 30% full-time residents. We would like to see this percentage closer to 50-50, and we're working on that. But one thing is clear, all our members share a passionate love for Southampton and a desire to see it continue to develop while preserving its unique nature. As all of you are aware, the overwhelming majority of our members disagreed with the decision of the previous council to invite NWMO to consider Saugeen Shores as a possible site for a high-level nuclear waste repository. I hope we now recognize that there are good arguments to be made on both sides of this question, and we exercised our democratic right to object, to question, and protest. Further, as we learn more about the ever-changing and ever-expanding plan for the Kincardine DGR, we began to raise questions about that proposal as well. As we all know, NWMO has now abandoned any attempt to locate a DGR within the municipal boundaries of Saugeen Shores, but we have continued to express our opposition to DGR1 in Kincardine. And before proceeding to our current concerns, I'd like to comment briefly on the statements regarding democratic principles made by John Mann in his deputation filed, but unfortunately was not able to deliver it, last month. We agree with John that the last council appeared to develop a culture of silence. Motions were passed without debate, deputations were endured and often ignored. We believe that citizens are entitled to know the reasons our elected officials decide on a particular course of action. We also believe that staff recommendations merit some reasoned discussion prior to proceeding to a vote. This council has the opportunity to set a new tone, and we are encouraged by statements made during the election period by some candidates, now elected or acclaimed, who that appeared to favor more discussion, debate, and transparency. We hope that you follow through. Southampton Residents Association did a survey of our members in the spring of 2014, asking their weight and ranking of issues facing Southampton. Detailed results of this survey can be found on our website at www.southamptonontario.org, but I will talk about the top two concerns. The number one most important issue with our members in early 2014 was Lake Huron water quality and water levels. Our feeling is that this concern has only escalated with last summer's experience when for the first time ever both Southampton and Port Elgin beaches were posted as unsafe for swimming for an entire week in high tourist season. We are concerned about the amount of fecal matter coming down the Saugeen River, whether this has been increasing over the years and whether environmental regulations to control and reduce it are being effective. We have a director working on gathering information from the province in this regard. But we're also proposing to expand public education and awareness of water quality issues. One approach, just in the initial stages of planning, is an annual Children's Water Festival, in which we would hope to involve the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority, Saugeen First Nation, GC Houston Public School, as well as other community groups. While primarily focused on children, it could also include an adult education component with speakers from SVCA or elsewhere on water-related matters. Our plan is to have a modest first festival in 2015, providing something that we can build on in future years. The second most important issue, according to our members, is preserving and enhancing the unique character of Southampton as it grows and develops as a community within Saugeen Shores. Many of our members agree with the guidelines for economic development along the highway that were set out in the 2009 Bruce County study, Saugeen Shores Design Guidelines 2009. This plan was developed with a great deal of input from both our own Saugeen Shores town staff and from numerous community groups. It envisions developments that are inviting to pedestrians and cyclists as well as being accessible by automobile. It envisions attractive landscaping along the roadway and monument-style signage for commercial establishments. We can understand that developers may initially balk, but experience in many other North American communities tells us that such initiatives can strengthen local businesses throughout the town. We believe that there is no legitimate reason to disregard the good work and effort put into this plan, and we would like to see these guidelines debated and hopefully implemented. There are a few matters that our board requests immediate consideration by this council. These relate to the Island Street drain, storm sewers and small streams emptying across the beach, the long-discussed swimming pool and recreation center, and finally the matter of dogs and bikes on the Southampton Beach Boardwalk. Let's start off with the Island Street drain. Island Street storm sewer outlet, and there's a couple of photos attached to my presentation. The drain is located immediately to the south of Jerry's Fries and the old railway dock, and it was installed a couple of decades ago, I guess 25 years ago, at the time the water pumping station was built. There is substantial evidence that this ditch has contributed to the growth of the Harmer Street dune immediately to the south, but I would like, perhaps more importantly, to direct your attention to the upper photograph in the page labeled Figure 1, to the wide swath of wet sand beach widening from the outlet of this drain to the lake, whereas shown in the lower photo, no one wants to place their blanket. This is a huge area that used to be one of the best parts of Southampton Beach, an area with convenient parking close by, an area that was most attractive to visitors and residents alike. In short, it used to be like the area immediately in front of Jerry's Fries, an area that is often overcrowded with people. Eliminating the drain, filling the ditch, and allowing the sand to build up over this huge wet spot restores this section of beach to what it was a couple of decades ago. This will take time, which is why this project should be undertaken now. And I might add, just over the weekend we received a staff report, and I appreciate the effort that went into the staff report, indicating the history of this drain and estimating that it would perhaps be $170,000 to reroute it elsewhere. That's a lot of money, but on the other hand, we've got a magnificent natural resource here in the beach, and we've got a huge segment of it that has been destroyed by this drain. Second section, several years ago, there's 7 storm sewers and small streams which empty across Southampton Beach into the lake between High Street and the southernmost one is a few meters south of South Street. In the summer of 2011, the Grey Bruce Health Unit, at our request, tested all of these for E. coli. And as expected, all readings were above both the federal and provincial limits for safe recreational use, some of them substantially above. The assumption is that all these outlets will show elevated readings all the time due to animal and avian fecal contamination. Young children are attracted to play in these streams and outlets due to warm and shallow water. We recommend that warning signs be posted on each of these locations outlining that it is not safe to swim or play in these waters. Going on to the municipal swimming pool and recreational complex, that was not on our survey last spring, so we have not surveyed our members in this regard. But my belief is that the majority of our full-time residents and a substantial number of seasonal residents feel that a town of this size and prosperity should have such a facility. And we would endorse the motion suggested by my colleague, the president of the Beachers, put forth in his deputation 2 weeks ago. And finally, for those who have been to our AGM, they will know that no single topic takes up more time and evokes more passion and excitement than the matter of dogs and bikes on the Southampton Boardwalk, or the cement sidewalk that stretches along the beach from High Street to Jerry's Fries. But we began to hear last summer that everything that we thought we understood that the bylaws said is in fact ambiguous. The Animal Control Bylaw forbids dogs from May 1st to October 1st in the area commonly used as a public beach, but it does not define public beach and whether that includes or excludes the boardwalk. The Traffic Bylaw forbids riding a bicycle on any sidewalk within the municipality, but defines sidewalk as a pedestrian path along an open roadway, thus apparently excluding Southampton's boardwalk. SRA's board of directors is quite content if, well, let me put it the other way. We would like to see the bylaws clarified so that they're exactly specific as to what's allowed and not. We have no objection to an amendment to the bylaws that says leash dogs are allowed along the sidewalk. And we have no objection to an amendment to the bylaw that classes the boardwalk as a sidewalk under the Traffic Act, or Traffic Bylaw. It's important that bicycles be walked, because riding them is extremely dangerous because of all the blind entrances along the sidewalk. So if nothing else, our request is that before this summer, these bylaws be clarified so that signage can be up in place, and it will make my job a lot easier. It will make the staff's job a lot easier, and so forth. Southampton Residents Association hopes that we can work together on these various projects and concerns for the eventual benefit of the entire community. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Jim. Any questions or comments for Jim? Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Jim, for your presentation. I just had just a comment to one of the things you raised early on about the water quality and coming out of Saugeen River and the Children's Water Festival that you guys are thinking of. And I just wanted to make it clear, this is a bit of a plug also for something that's already going on, which is Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority and other agencies already do a Children's Water Festival in Chesley. Every year. And
during the school year.
Yeah, and it's a great event, and I think it would be great to have, I think it would be great to have more of them.
Our thought is to have one in July or August, and
yeah.
I think we've got an ideal situation if we have it at the mouth of the river or in the museum. Both locations would be super. Get the First Nations involved and the SVCA.
I guess my point is that the SVCA is doing it and has some expertise around it. So, I would encourage you to contact the SVCA and do that. And the other thing that is already out there as well with regard to water quality in the river are the watershed report cards, which I'm sure you guys have probably seen as well. And Saugeen Valley monitors surface water as well as groundwater at various locations throughout the river. And has very detailed reporting for many years about the quality of surface water coming down the Saugeen. So you've mentioned that you've been going to the province to get information, and you've gone to the Conservation Authority as well in that, but I'd encourage you to, if you haven't, make sure to get to the Conservation Authority and get those report cards, because we have lots of detailed information on that. And actually my last recollection of where we were at with the last report card was surface water was I can't remember exactly where that station is, but it's near Denny's Dam, I think, or in that range. It was rating a C surface water quality, so water in the river, and that means a lot of different things, and you have to kind of get into some detail about what that means. But what it does mean is it could be better, and so it's something that's worth talking about.
Well, as we all know, when the plume from the river comes out into the lake, if it's a northwest wind, it comes down the length of the beach and even to Port Elgin. If it's a southwest wind, it tends to get farther out into the lake before running up the north shore. But it's whichever way it goes, it's a problem.
If I can, so that's that point. If I could, Mr. Mayor, on the other point, I just wanted to be very clear. If you could, I'm not sure how clear you can be, but I'd like to be as clear as you can be on the dogs, on the boardwalk, Southampton boardwalk that you were mentioning, and on the bicycle issue. Is it the opinion then of the SRA that the bylaw should be amended to allow leash dogs on that piece of sidewalk, and and that bicycles should not be, that we should amend the bylaw to ensure that bicycles should not be ridden on the sidewalk, that they should be walked on the sidewalk. Am I clear that that's the position of the...
That's the position of our beach committee and our board of directors. There will be individual members of SRA who object to it.
That's all you can do. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
For a point there, and I know you've mentioned it here, would it be possible that you could send us a letter or an email just with what you've said there, Jim, so that we fully understand what the position of the board is? Just send it to Linda or you or myself.
Linda's got a copy of our latest newsletter to members, which states...
No, I was about what you've just said to Luke about what your beach committee and your board recommend for dogs and bikes on the sidewalk or boardwalk, or call it what you will.
Our latest newsletter says that, and I gave Linda a copy today.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Jim, for the presentation. The comment in it about posting warning signs or notices of some kind at the storm outfalls, there's already a couple of those spots in Southampton signed. I think it's reasonable to continue to do that. Perhaps they all won't get signed immediately, but I think that that's a good plan, and I'm guessing that it's part of a plan this summer to at least get a couple more of those signs up in a few more locations. I do want to comment, though, about the dog and the bike one. It was extremely confusing when signs were taken down last summer without any corresponding comment or discussion about why they were taken down and what needed to come from that. So I would hope as a member of council that we address that in advance of the season and that we get some encouraging signage up there about what is allowed. And, it's you mentioned about bikes are unsafe because of all of the blind entrances. Bikes are simply unsafe because there's that many people walking and people with strollers on that stretch of sidewalk that bikes being ridden, it's just unsafe because of that as well as everything else. But I sincerely hope that we do this within the next couple of months so that well in advance of when they need to be there, signs are up there, and so that there can be no question this time about what's okay and not okay in that's in that location. Thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I have a few points here. Thank you, Jim, for your presentation. The fecal matter in the Saugeen River is not a very happy story. I wonder if we can get some data points and some idea from staff as to the source and the event. If this is if it's a massive rainstorm event that caused an overflow, what were the events that caused fecal matter in the Saugeen River? I would ask that question. Another one is
I think you would be better to direct that to probably to the Conservation Authority than our staff. They're much more, they do the sampling and they'll have a better profile and idea of upstream causes all the way back into Grey County. So I would just, I'm just saying you're likely to get more accurate information from the Conservation Authority.
I would ask them that. Thank you. The Waterfront Master Plan, Mr. Mayor, as you know, spoke to increasing the size of the boardwalk, allowing for bikes in a controlled manner, allowing for designated dog park areas, and spoke to many of these issues that Jim is speaking to tonight. So my understanding, Mr. Mayor, is the Waterfront Master Plan was accepted, but it hasn't been approved. Is that the case?
I would say yes.
So how can we move to bring the waterfront plan back to the table and look at sections and approve sections? Some of these sections that can be approved are about signage, are about very minor costs to set up like a dog park. That would be another one of my points. The one about the children in the water, it was also in the Waterfront Master Plan, and it was taken very seriously by the people on the committee, ad hoc committee. And we believe that a sign is not sufficient to steer children away. Some children can't read the signs, and some parents are looking the other way. I believe that physical barriers are the best attempt to protect an unknowing child. And I would ask, Mr. Mayor, that we ask staff to bring us back some report that says what kind of physical barrier could we put in place to prevent children from going into water that's not good. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? If not, then thanks very much, Jim. Thanks for your the next deputation then is Harvey Wepler. Welcome, Harvey.
It was my opinion that the draft for the affluent outflow would be presented at this point. I assume Council's had previously and has had a chance to look over it to some degree. We have some real concerns in regard to this project. Our family has farmed along Mill Creek for the last 97 years, as my letter indicates. And when this initial pipe was put to the river to take care of the effluent from the plant, there was strong objection by the family and neighbors at that time that it be taken all the way to the river. As you are well aware, if you have lived in this area for any length of time, we do have dry summers where Mill Creek is very low. I can jump across it with my good shoes on and not get wet. And then we have the spring runoff where it has been froze solid, and then all of a sudden we get the big gush of thaw, and we have ice that's 8 and 10 feet high on both sides of that creek. It has done considerable damage. As the maps indicate in the draft plan, there are some real serious erosion concerns between where this pipe crosses Mill Creek and goes to the river and the outlet of Mill Creek into Saugeen River. We have seen certain areas erode there by many, many feet. There's one particular area north of our buildings at the other farm where that creek makes almost a U-turn and comes back. And we have trees going in there that are lying in the river now. In addition to that, I have seen in the summertime 3 beaver dams between the outlet and where the pipe crosses Mill Creek. Now, there is thought that Mill Creek could be protected if this effluent is dropped just straight into Mill Creek with riffraff stone. That doesn't solve the problem from there to the outlet. We certainly need to look at that problem if we're going to dump this stuff into Mill Creek. The question is not the quality of it, maybe. Tests show that the quality coming out of the plant are supposed to be fine. We hope they are, and we hope to continue to be. When this was initially built and put in, our town had a population of maybe 2,500. And now we have appreciated the growth over the last number of years. We've come to the point where we are now, nice population, and we need to do something with that outflow to handle the volume. Quite understandable. However, that does not mean that things have changed enough environmentally to take and dump it into Mill Creek. There's just not enough volume there. There's no other town in the watershed that dumps theirs in that small a stream. And I'm sure that even though Mr. Graham is well qualified, I'd like to quote from something he said here about 6 years ago at a council meeting. September the 1st, 2009. Mill Creek is a lot smaller. And this is an article in our local paper. So the dilution of the effluent would be a lot less. And the temperature of that stream, its environmental condition, and coming up with recommendations from us about the impact of the ecology of the river if we choose to put the effluent into it. Of course, the effluent's going to go to the river. The former councillor at that time questioned him on this, Victoria, and she indicated that maybe this could be done by a soaking pond in a wetland. And he said no, that wasn't possible, that he had some experience with that back in the early 70s when he was at Port Perry. And I'm going to quote again what he said. In the early 70s, Graham was part of a MOE-sponsored wetland experiment in Port Perry. Because of that experiment, he said, it was probably showing his bias against wetlands, as he answered. With a wetland in the winter, there's a lot of problems. He said, when you get ice over top of your wetland, you lose oxygen. Your protein, nitrogen, become ammonia, and doesn't get converted to nitrate. End of quote. I'm very concerned about this going into Mill Creek, and so we can express our concern to you. We wish to thank you for having heard us out, and hope you give careful consideration to this when you make your decision.
Thanks very much, Harvey. Has anybody any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, thank you, Harvey, for your deposition. Obviously, you're very well versed, and you know quite a bit of the history on this. And I tend to agree with you that the people that decided, the people that sat around this room or a similar room to this back in 1968, when they decided to spend the extra money to run that pipe across land and dump into the larger body of Saugeen River, obviously took all this into consideration at that time and came to that conclusion. And I'm concerned myself about the not just the dilution, but the fact that you're putting cleaner water into that creek than what would normally be coming down that creek, which may prohibit migratory fish, because there are migratory fish that come up that river. Because Mill Creek runs up through the back of my property as well, and there are trout, and there are suckers, and there are different fish that come up from Lake Huron. So I share your concerns, and erosion is not something that I'm totally familiar with in that section of creek, but I will certainly be, when the weather allows it, taking a ride or a walk or a trip down there to have a better look at it. And so I just wanted to say thank you for that, and your concerns are well heard.
I'd be quite happy to entertain anyone that wishes to take the journey along the creek and show you.
Thanks very much, Art. Oh, sorry, Councillor Gray. Sorry.
Harvey, thank you. It was an excellent deputation. I wondered, could you provide the reference for the article that you referred to from September 1st, 2009 to the clerk, and maybe she could provide us with copies of that?
It's our local paper here, September the 1st, 2009.
That's the beacon.
On page 2 and page 5.
Thank you.
If there's no further questions, again, thank you, and thank you for the meeting we had the other day. The process, really, the environmental assessment process that we've gone through identifies a problem, and then it eventually is, hopefully, with all the input, lead us to the best solution, and hopefully that's what we'll get out of this, Harvey. So thanks for your input.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're going to discuss it further, right? We had a chance to discuss it as an environmental services report.
The report on the EA will be presented later, yes.
It's too bad they left.
The next item on the agenda then is a general government staff report, and it has to do with the tourism website, and our CAO is going to present.
Sorry about that. It was on. Three parties met in December to discuss next steps as the contract term was nearing completion. And there was consensus that the existing arrangement was successful and should continue for a further 3-year term. A number of proposed minor modifications to the terms were reviewed, discussed, and will be incorporated into the amended contract. And Mr. Mayor, those discussions are still ongoing with the operator at this time, but there's nothing that appears to be a showstopper that would prevent Council from considering this recommendation tonight.
Thank you. Then the recommendation is that the existing agreement with 2299701 Ontario Inc. Tourstown Online Solutions be extended for a further 3-year term, and the authorizing bylaw be considered at an upcoming meeting. Questions or comments? Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make the comment that I'm very pleased to see that this relationship has worked out well enough that staff feels comfortable recommending a renewal of the lease. As Larry pointed out in his report, it was a different type of arrangement than what had been reached in the past, or that we had worked with in the past in terms of website or anything else. And I think it's innovative, and I think it works well, and I think it provides a good service. And I'm just very happy to see that that it's going to proceed on pretty well the same terms that we had agreed to initially. I think it's a great success. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. After I read this, I went online and looked at and just kind of looked around in on the site, and the Visit Us section, I think. I thought it was very good. There's one thing that I just wondered about, and that is the fact that I didn't see a lot of mention of the Bruce County Museum in terms of children's, it had family activities, kids activities. It was mentioned maybe once, but not as much as I think it could have been. So that's my only thought on that. Thank you.
I think he's taken a note of it, so I'll excuse. Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Also, perhaps Larry could take a note that it would be nice if Tourist Town came in the next little while and gave us a deputation where they talked about statistics associated with the way that the site's been used, and just some highlights and maybe some future plans. That would be, I think, good information for all of us as an update. Thank you.
Any further comments? All in favor of the recommendation? Opposed, if any? That's carried. The next item on the agenda is an Environmental Services and Transportation Report. It's an information report on the Port Elgin Wastewater Treatment Plant outfall, EA, and our Director of Public Works, Stuart Doyle, will introduce.
Yeah, thanks. Very briefly, GSS Engineering on behalf of the town has initiated a environmental assessment Class B to evaluate the effluent outfall at the Port Elgin Wastewater Treatment Plant. The EA process is intended to investigate the natural, social, cultural, and built for the municipal structure. As part of the EA process, a project file has been compiled, which we'll be discussing this evening. The project file includes background data, initial comments, public comments, and other other aspects as well. The project file for the environmental assessment was prepared by GSS and is being presented tonight by Mr. Jeff Graham.
Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks very much, Stuart, and it's my pleasure to appear before Saugeen Shores Council tonight and staff. As Stuart mentioned, we were awarded this assignment, well, I don't think you did mention it, but we were awarded this assignment last year, and we began the process in about July. And it is a public consultation process, so we're very interested in the comments from the public and review agencies, and we've had some very good comments from the public in response to our public meeting we held in November. So I do have a PowerPoint presentation to go through, and it's I don't think it's too painfully long. And perhaps if you have questions as I go, that's fine. And I do have a slide at the end that invites questions. So we'll get into her here. See if I turn on the button right, Linda. Now, this isn't the greatest map, but we're trying to show the geography surrounding the Port Elgin sewage treatment plant. I've got a little red dot here. So it's located right at the east part of the urban built-up area of Port Elgin. And it's just north of the closed-out landfill site, which is now I think the Dog Run area. Municipally owned gravel pits just on the north side of it. And while you can't see this, I'll just try and outline how the sewage is treated at this site. The raw sewage is pumped from two major pumping stations to the treatment plant and enters a screening and grit removal room first, which is a rather nasty affair. I won't go into details, but it takes out a lot of the non-treatable components through screening and sand and gravel removal as well. The main treatment at the plant is biological. The sewage enters aeration tanks where it's a mixed liquor term is used. It's the aeration tanks that are full of bacteria that decompose the waste products in the sewage, and we wind up producing what we call secondary effluent. So that mixed liquor in the aeration tanks then flows to two big round circular tanks called clarifiers. That allows the solids, the biological solids, which again is bacteria, to drop out of the partially treated wastewater, and the clarified effluent flows off the surface of the clarifiers and then goes through a UV ultraviolet disinfection system before it is discharged to the Saugeen River. So the process is, in round terms, is considered secondary treatment. There is a biological step which is important, and it's worth noting that once the biological process is complete, very much the great majority of the biologically degradable wastes are removed. The ammonia is converted to nitrate through a process called nitrification, which Mr. Wepler referred to. And once that effluent goes through the UV, we have an effluent that's relatively clear, low in nutrients, ammonia converted to nitrate, and E. coli concentrations that are typically 5 or less, and very rarely over 20. And that effluent then runs down a hill at the back of the plant into the Mill Creek and Saugeen River valleys. And just about here, it's at the base of a fairly steep hill, and then runs through a pipe which is quite flat, over half a kilometer to the Saugeen River. And the issue of the outfall was identified by myself when I wrote the 2009 master plan. I don't recall appearing in front of council to discuss that, but as Harvey mentioned, I was here in 2009. We had some discussion about that, but at that time, we did identify the outfall as a concern. So 2009, we identified the outfall as an issue in the master plan. And the major concern was it's a 16-inch diameter pipe, and the analysis that we did would indicate that it's too small to convey peak flows of effluent that distance without creating so much what we call head loss in the engineering world, without it partially or fully backing up the hill to the outlet of the treatment plant. So it's possible that under extreme outflow conditions, high flows, you could get the effluent wanting to back up the hill, which, at least in my mind, raised a number of concerns. The pipe itself is quite old, installed about 1968. We don't know the condition of the hill of the pipe as it runs down the river. And the whole idea that this pipe becomes pressurized during the peak flow is not itself an issue. It's really the surcharging that it creates, that it could be backing up toward the plant. And it's something that theoretically will get worse as time goes on and the town grows and those peak flows get bigger in proportion to town population. But there's two other major problems that we saw with the pipe as well. The one thing is the legal easement for that pipe is a little unclear. I'm no lawyer, but that's my understanding, is that your easement or ownership of the land where that pipe crosses is somewhat in question. And the other thing that's more pragmatic would be if that pipe was to break tomorrow, you've really no way to fix that or maintain that. It's really in a remote location where there's no road access. So it would be certainly troublesome for, even in the summertime, to maintain or repair that pipe in that part of the stretch is going to be tough. So just back for my map here, we do show Mill Creek winding down somewhat parallel to the Saugeen River. As Harvey mentioned, it does go through a lot of twists and turns in the lower section. There are some high sand banks that are, yes, prone to erosion, and there is erosion occurring as currently, for sure. Saugeen River is again flowing from south to north, more or less parallel, and as Harvey mentioned, does offer significantly more flow, particularly in the summertime for dilution. So we are left with two sort of possible solutions here long term. Both have pros and both have cons. So I think that's about it on the drawing. I'll just go to the next step. Okay, and as mentioned, in 2009 we began the master plan. Sorry, in 2009 we did the master plan for the water and sewage systems in both Port Elgin and Southampton, and we identified the outfall as too small for peak effluent flows, particularly in the future. And the issue of surcharging was a concern. Again, the surcharging arises from the long length of the pipe with its relatively small diameter. And again, the access to repair or maintain that pipe is difficult. Back in 2011, we did a little bit of work, follow-up work on that whole question. We estimated the flow of Mill Creek during extreme dry summer periods. We did background water quality testing in Mill Creek and other preliminary studies for potential consideration of effluent to Mill Creek. However, that study was put on hold at that time when there was periodic high ammonia levels in the effluent. And we went through a bit of a period there where the town engaged both your treatment plant operator, Ontario Clean Water Agency, and Conestoga Rovers to look at what might cause those periodic fairly high ammonia levels. And those reports came back with a grab bag of possible reasons why that might be happening. But the key one is just more consistent operation of the treatment plant, both in terms of what we call sludge wasting and also how decant from the sludge storage tanks is returned back to the treatment process for treatment. And the last 3 years, ammonia levels have been much improved, and we'll talk about those in a little while. And as mentioned, we started our Class EA back in July. So I believe, as Mike mentioned, a Class EA is about evaluation of what I would call all reasonable alternatives. So we identified what we thought were 5 reasonable alternatives for consideration. The first one, perhaps the simplest, is we just take the effluent through the short pipe and we put it right in Mill Creek, spring, summer, fall, and winter, year-round. The short pipe allows us, obviously, to avoid the great majority of that surcharge issue. This friction loss I talked about is proportional to the length. If you cut the length by 2/3, you cut the surcharge by 2/3. We also greatly relieve ourselves of the anxiety of long-term maintenance for either repair or of that portion of the pipe between Mill Creek and the Saugeen River. Option 2, we could allow a portion of the peak effluent flow to go to Mill Creek. So when we have those surcharge events, some of the effluent continues all the way through the pipe to the Saugeen River, but a portion overflows due to the pressurized condition in the pipe to Mill Creek. And one would think that would normally only happen when not only are the rivers high, like wet periods that also cause your sewage flows to increase. So the peaks would assumedly occur during the time when there's quite a bit of water in both Mill Creek and the Saugeen River. Third alternative, we get fancier now. We put a valve chamber down near Mill Creek, and we discharge effluent to Mill Creek in the fall, winter, and spring when there's more dilution water, but just turn the valves around and discharge the effluent all the way to the Saugeen during the summer. 4, Dave and I talked about a system where we set X liters a second go to Mill Creek, and any additional flow goes all the way to the Saugeen River. But I've used the word complex there because I think we'd wind up building something up at the top of the hill in the treatment plant that's quite expensive, prone to failure and maintenance concerns. It's a toughy one technically to do that. And then the 5th option is we just leave the outfall pipe as is, the do-nothing option. And I want to point out, of those 5 major alternatives, the only one that relieves the problem of land ownership and access to the remote section of the pipe is really alternative 1. So in the materials we provided at the public open house and in the draft report file that you have, we came up with some estimated costs from a capital point of view for the different alternatives. And if you look down the left-hand side, I've got option 1, 2, and 2A. And in talking to Dave over the last month or so, I've said I'd like to introduce a 2A to 2, which is just the inclusion of a valve on the outfall. So that would normally be open, but if you ever had a problem between Mill Creek and the Saugeen River on your pipe, you could close that valve, forcing the water to overflow into Mill Creek. So it's what you would do if you had a problem with your extended pipe that you're going to have trouble getting to. And then we have options 3, 4, and 5. Capital costs for each least amount for option 1, and they slowly they grow in both in terms of cost and complexities. We get up to option 4, $366,000. I do have $0 there for option 5, the do nothing, but I think that's very misleading. That assumes that there'll never be a cost for replacement or twinning of the extended outfall you have from Mill Creek to the Saugeen River, and I will talk a bit more about that. Annual maintenance costs. Most of those maintenance costs of $4,000 to $5,000 a year are I came up with periodic inspections of the extended outfall all the way from Mill to the Saugeen River. At this point, my understanding is it's never looked at. So if there was a break halfway through, perhaps the landowner would say, hey, I got a big wet spot where it never used to be wet. But as far as I know, there's really no inspection. There is at least one manhole along that length that somebody could go in every 3 months in the summer and open it up and just make sure the water's flowing and nothing strange is happening. And that's what most of those costs are for. The costs are a little bit higher for options 3 and 4, where you have a little more mechanical stuff you have to maintain every year. And then the do nothing option, again, is the basic cost to run that inspection a couple times a year. Ministry of Environment comments. When we, before we started on the EA, we'd gone back to the Ministry of Environment in London and said, we'd like to start this Class EA. What is your position on this? And the issue, of course, is the dilution of the effluent in Mill Creek. It's not the best or the preferred situation, but the preliminary position of the Ministry of Environment in London right now is that they are giving this proposed discharge to Mill Creek conditional support on the outcome of the EA. And the reason that they're potentially supportive in this case is that they recognize that the length of Mill Creek impacted by, say, higher phosphorus and low dilution is fairly short. We got about 1 kilometer of creek from the discharge point down to where it joins the Saugeen River. They said, please reassure us and comfort us that there are no species at risk in the lower section of Mill Creek. And working with the DFO and other agencies, we identified what species at risk might possibly be there. And the one that jumps up is called the rainbow mussel. We were fortunate enough that an expert from DFO was in the area, and he undertook a personal evaluation of Lower Mill Creek last summer for us. And his feeling is there's no evidence that rainbow mussel inhabit the lower section of Mill Creek. The other thing they were concerned about is prove to us that there are no cold water fish species in the lower section of Mill Creek. The previous studies we had done back in 2011 were pretty conclusive. It's a warm water stream. Summer water temperatures in the lower section of Mill Creek are too warm, too hot to support cold water fish. I do agree that there's potentially, I'm going to call them stray steelhead that run up Mill Creek. The migratory run of steelhead out of Lake Huron up the Saugeen River is almost world famous. But so we went in and electroshocked the lower section of Mill Creek at 2 locations and found no young rainbow trout, either what we call young of the year or smolt rainbows or any other cold water fish species. So again, they may occur sporadically during spring and fall, but there's no evidence they inhabit the lower section of Mill Creek through the summer period. So we were comforted that we had no SAR species and no evidence of cold water fish species in lower Mill Creek. We had our public meeting for the project in November, and we presented the 5 major alternatives, including the costs of each, including maintenance and social and environmental impacts of each one. We did identify on a preliminary basis that at that time, option 1, which was discharge of effluent to Mill Creek, was our preliminary preferred option. As it eliminated the surcharge issue, we felt we had minimal environmental impact on Mill Creek. It cleared up the land ownership question, and we avoided long-term maintenance costs of a pipe in a very remote location. Capital cost also appeared reasonable at approximately $76,000, and the maintenance costs would be quite low, and we basically assigned them at $0 per year. We had 5 comment sheets from the public, we're listing here the issues that were raised. We've heard about at least one tonight, the possible erosion of stream banks of Mill Creek, with the thinking being more flow in the river from extra effluent will lead to more erosion. Odors in Mill Creek was raised as a concern. The dilution issue of putting effluent into Mill Creek during the low summer flow in particular. There was a very interesting issue brought up about muskie habitat at the confluence area between Mill Creek and the Saugeen River. And 10 points if you know what muskie are. Anybody know? Here's one. Who's caught a muskie? Oh. I've caught a muskie. Have you? And I'm not going to deny that they're in there. Though I tried to catch one myself, I couldn't catch any. My muskie catches have been all through the Kawarthas and Halliburton area. Drug residues. There's a concern about, I'm going to call them human pharmaceuticals, making their way through treatment plants and what effect do they have on the environment. The issue was raised, the outfall was built to Saugeen River back in 1968 for a reason, so why change away from that? There was a concern about how the effluent would be discharged directly into Mill Creek. We had an issue of effect on cold water fish species, and also one on ice blockages on Mill Creek due to effluent discharge. So we took all of those concerns and we've addressed them at some length in our draft report. And I believe you folks received our draft report last week. There's a lot of reading there, a lot of complicated topics, a lot of references. Go to this website if you want to see a discussion about pharmaceuticals. And I tell you, it's not easy sledding some of these issues. But we have prepared what we think is a reasonable, balanced response to all of those concerns. And we have prepared the draft report. We have, as noted, we've tried to deal basically head-on with the concerns raised by the public. And I'll just go through a number of them now. Okay, so in our opinion, effluent in Mill Creek will not worsen erosion of stream banks or cause odors. We're saying it should not worsen the erosion because our estimates of what the peak flood flow in Mill Creek is really quite massive compared to the peak flow we might be putting into Mill at that point. I'm not going to say it's a drop in the bucket, but it's a pretty small adder to the stream flows already that are occurring in Mill Creek. In terms of odor, I was actually at the treatment plant tonight. I know there's been odor concerns from the public, but if you actually go into the final ultraviolet disinfection room, where the final effluent is passing through the UV channels and going out to the river, there's really no odor to this effluent at all. I think the odor problems you've had in the past from the treatment plant have been largely linked, at least in my opinion, to areas in your sludge digestion process, and perhaps even the sludge return area. And working with Dave, and when I was with Genevieve a few years ago, we put in the Headworks building, which I think has helped the odors. Hopefully I'll hear some nods here, that the odors from the treatment plant have been reduced by getting some of these non-degradable stuff out of the sewage right off the bat. Phosphorus enrichment, absolutely a possibility during low stream flow periods when we have minimal dilution. Again, the MOE is agreeable in this case to see some enrichment above what they normally like to see, given the relatively short length of Mill Creek down to the Saugeen River. And I don't disagree. The original outfall was built all the way to the Saugeen River to provide the greater dilution. However, cost to replace the outfall or twin the outfall pipe, plus long-term maintenance costs, the access concerns, would warrant consideration, in my opinion, of effluent discharge to Mill Creek, given minimal environmental concerns. And I'm not saying they're zero, but given that I think they're relatively small, I think it's worth looking at. Pharmaceutical concerns, complex and emerging issue. In the report, I go through this explanation of what we call solids retention time, and it's really the average age of your bacteria in those aeration tanks. And the evidence out there suggests that I've seen that if that SRT time is greater than 15 days, we don't see the pharmaceutical residuals. I'm no PhD student. I'm only going on what I've read. And again, I would say if I had to, it would appear that the science is on the side of this plant as providing effective elimination of those residues. Cold water fish, SAR species, as mentioned, we did those studies, and there's no evidence that SAR species or cold water fish inhabit Mill Creek at the lower end. Muskellunge. The muskie and the Saugeen River have received a significant study from the MNR. Andy McKee, who I interviewed following the issue of muskie, I talked to him at length. When he was with the MNR, he actually radio tagged a number of large adult muskie in the river. So they catch them on a hook and line, they anesthetize the fish, they open them up, and they actually put a radio transmitter inside the fish and release them, and they track the whereabouts of those fish from plane or helicopter on a year-round basis. And that's it's a pretty groundbreaking study they did. And he did say that the evidence would show that they do spawn, there's some of those adult muskie do spawn in the lower section of Mill Creek at the confluence with the Saugeen. However, he did not feel that the effluent would likely affect their habitat, though he is concerned about enrichment in the lower section of the river with with higher loads of phosphorus. He also asked that we discuss it further with MNR and Owen Sound to see if they have any additional fisheries information. And he also suggested I talk to two longtime muskie fishermen, which I did, and they both expressed concern about muskie in the lower section of Mill Creek. One thing I should make clear is when Andy McKee did his studies, he never did do an electroshock of lower Mill Creek to see if he would recover young or little baby or little immature muskie. He did that in other tributaries of the Saugeen, but it's never been done in Mill. The summary. I feel, and I'm recommending that that effluent outfall pipe be addressed to ensure that there is satisfactory performance of the treatment plant on a long-term basis. In spite of the concerns, we are still at this point recommending alternative 1 as our preliminary preferred recommendation. If alternative 1 is selected, my counsel, based on the muskie issue, should be that there should be some assessment of the importance of that junction habitat for that species of fish. And that should likely be done before the effluent is switched over to discharge to Mill. And that if you did go ahead with the switch over to Mill, that muskie assessment be done every, say, 3 years, along with some regular monitoring of water quality and other environmental conditions in that last kilometer of Mill. The current what they call the ECA, your permit from the Ministry of Environment to discharge effluent to the environment right now does not have an ammonia limit. That would likely come on to your ECA if the effluent is discharged to mill, and likely they would want to lower your current limit for phosphorus from 1 milligram per liter down to a lower number, and I suspect they would want to see that cut in half. And I do have a slide here for questions. I would like to correct one thing Mr. Welper indicated. I'm not that old. I didn't do the research with MOE in the 70s. I did that in about when I graduated from university in 1986. And we did do work on the treatment of raw sewage with wetlands at Port Elgin. And I think that's an important distinction. If we took the effluent and tried to put it into a wetland from your treatment plant, that's a lot different than treating raw sewage. But I still would stand by my original comments that building a wetland at the end of that pipe somehow down in that valley, which is prone to flooding and everything else, would be really tough, and I don't think you'd get much water quality improvement.
Thanks very much, Jeff. I guess we'll open it to questions. Start with Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Jeff, for your report. I did read it, and there's certainly a lot of information in there. You talk about these surcharging events.
Right.
Are these theoretical events, or have they been witnessed events? Like, I know there's manhole covers, so presumably yes, the manhole covers would be lifted if there were surcharging and the water was coming up through the top?
All the manhole covers are bolted down so they can't lift. But there's certainly evidence, if you go down to the manhole that's just west of Mill Creek, like on our side of Mill Creek, it's always wet. You can basically see where the water has pressurized the inside, and I suspect almost squirted out under pressure. What we don't know is happening further upstream at the next manhole right at the toe of the hill. It's completely buried, and I think Dave's going to go on an archaeological expedition this spring and try and find it. Probably try and open it up and see what condition is occurring there. So all the calculations I've done are theoretical, but some of the evidence that I've discussed with Dave might suggest it's worse than what the theoretical numbers are. So when we do a theoretical calculation, we assume we know the pipe diameter, we assume a certain smoothness, and but there could be concrete debris in that pipe that's making it effectively smaller. Mm-hmm. And to me, the evidence would suggest that's what we have. Things are maybe worse than what the theoretical numbers say.
There's no way to do an internal inspection of this pipe?
You could open up the manhole, but it's a long way. It's a long, long way between manholes and I'm not sure how far you could go. When we TV inspect, say, sanitary sewers, you can probably go 150 meters. But we're talking, a 500 meter stretch with 200 to 300 meters between manholes, if you can get to the manholes on the other side of the river.
With no volunteers?
No volunteers yet.
No. And the second thing is with you mentioned that it's unclear about the ownership of the land or the registry of the land. Just a comment on that. I think we are lucky enough to have not only one but a couple of the local landowners who were involved back in 1968. So we have some history, and they come with some documentation as well to show that there are registrations and things like that around how that land came to be in the possession of the town, and vice versa with surrounding land. So I don't think it's as much of a mystery as portrayed.
Councillor Grace, and we'll get to Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Jeff. A question about the phosphorus level that you mentioned right at the end, where you said that it would likely have to be reduced by half. Is that true?
On the limit.
Alternative one.
Yes.
Right.
So right now your effluent comes out with my little facts and figures sheet here. Your effluent right now has, I take all the average values, about 0.33 milligrams per liter is your average value. So right now your permit allows you to have up to one. So we would expect the ministry would come in and say, we want you to cut your limit from 1 to 0.5.
Okay.
And what I would say should be fine because you're meeting the 0.5 now. You're down at the 0.33.
Okay. That was my
Yeah.
question. And then my other question with regard to the alternatives other than the do nothing one, is there any difference there in terms of safety to the public? I'm not talking about the environmental risk, but do you see one of those options being a safer option, regardless of cost?
Well, when you're down at Mill Creek, it looks like some of the Port Elgin teenagers do hang out and party down there a little bit. Are you concerned about like their well-being?
No,
like people...
I'm just concerned about just the water quality, like, or it going into the
in the mill?
yeah.
Well, when I think of safety, I don't think there's any physical risk. I honestly don't think we're going to get more ice. I think you'll get less ice. For instance, the effluent, we dropped by tonight. Effluent temperature tonight is about 9 Celsius. Most extended duration treatment plants stay quite warm in the winter. So all of Mill Creek's frozen solid over right now. If you put in water that's probably at least 7 up to 9 Celsius in it. So you might have less ice formation than you do in the wintertime. To me, the big risk is just environmental. What happens negatively to this river when we have quite a bit of effluent going into a small flow of water in the summertime? Again, that risk is only will impact the lower kilometer of the river before it mixes with the Saugeen. I think from the MOE point of view, too, is you still have the same pounds of phosphorus going into the Saugeen River
Right.
daily. It just comes in
Different way.
at a different spot.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Graham. Jeff, can you please, I don't know if you said it clear enough for me, but I'd like to know that this friction, this surcharging,
Right.
what it ends up doing, what the potential it could have is, so if we get one of these big 100-year storms of
Yes.
rain,
Yeah.
and we inundate the sewer plant with additional product water from all sources, from the rain, from the infiltration into the system back up to the plant, are we at risk then if we can't discharge it out of these pipes or this pipe fast enough for it to overflow in our water treatment plant?
It's a long shot, but theoretically it could back up right into where I was tonight, like in your UV building,
Right.
where you do your final flow measurement. It's going to cause a little bit of a flood at the top of the hill. I'm honestly not sure if I'm too worried about the odd flood. I think I'm more worried about what happens on the hill behind the treatment plant.
Sure.
There's some evidence it's not a very stable hill. We've got an old pipe down the hill, which is actually a corrugated metal pipe, which may be partially rusted. We don't know how strong it is anymore. But if that water, that pressurized, can somehow start to push through that old pipe through maybe cracks and stuff that have eroded through, it could destabilize the whole hill. And I'm not trying to be sensational about this, but to me that's the risk here. We've got this pressurized pipe that's not designed for pressure on a hillside that's not very stable. And we do have the UV treatment building quite close to the edge. I don't think anything's going to roll down the hill and wash into the valley, but it's not a situation that leaves me with a great deal of comfort. I mean, engineers like things solid.
If I follow up then, a couple more. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So can we clearly identify that the population can create a peak flow event today? Is it strictly the population that's creating peak flow, or is it natural occurrences?
No, your peak flows occur when it's really, really wet. Port Elgin sewage system does not have a lot of infiltration of groundwater or inflow of surface water into the sanitaries. It's a problem that plagues small town Ontario everywhere. But when you have peak flows, it's because it's super wet out, and there's enough of that groundwater and surface water getting into the sanitaries that you're creating all this water is going to the treatment plant. You have a high flow.
And we can't hold it back.
You can't hold it back.
Okay, last question then, thank you. So If we were to set up a Y arrangement at the top of the hill where the one pipe goes to Saugeen River and put a new pipe to Mill Creek with a manually operated valve, if we know that the peak flow events are due to weather-related instances, do we not have time to send an operator to open a manual valve and use a Y configuration and a separate pipe to Mill Creek, so we're only discharging into Mill Creek during bad weather situations? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm personally against any component of a sewage plant that if I'm water flowing through, I can't overflow, because somebody can always leave a valve shut when it shouldn't have been shut, or a vandal could come in and shut a valve. So actually alternative 2 is basically what you're saying. We go down the river, and once that pipe surcharges in this manhole on the west side, the water would rise up in the manhole. Instead of spurting out through the sides, it would start just to overflow into a channel that led to Mill. And that is basically foolproof from a vandalism or an operator error, and a lot less money.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber, and then we'll...
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the benefit of all the members of council, I'm sure sometime soon we'll have a chance to go take a visit to the sewage treatment plant, and that was one of the most illuminating tours that I had during my first term of council. I am curious to know, though, when this pipe originally got put in and it was taking flow from the plant to the river, that was a lot of years ago, and that was the accepted thing. It's like we would treat the water, and I don't doubt at all the quality of the material coming out of there, but we'll treat it and we'll just put it back into another flowing body of water, and off it goes. Here it is that much later. I'm really surprised that there's not an option up there that at least suggests a totally different approach to what we can do with this, because we're that many more years along and that much smarter. And, there's the flow coming out of it is, as I said, I have no doubts about the quality of it, but the opportunity to do something where that is discharged into some sort of wetland or wherever, where it percolates down and gets that extra filtration before it hits the water table, to me that seems like a good goal to have. I'm really curious to know why we have no option that goes in a sort of really different kind of direction, given the number of years between then and now, because I'd like to think that the science has given us a different approach than just taking something and putting it into water. There's a lot of other options. Is there a reason why we don't have? And I heard what you said about it comes down and whatever, but there's got to be another place somewhere near there that we would have the ability to do something differently, just as a discussion point. Is there?
Well, the water is going to wind up somewhere. I think your question is, can we not make it leaps and bounds better quality?
Or have it be approached differently than putting it into the river? Because when that happened, it was a long time ago. There's just, I have to believe and know that there's just been so much greater research and greater thought that that's not necessarily the only outlet anymore. Yeah. And I'm just curious why we don't have an opportunity to at least consider a different opportunity with effluent, especially since we don't even know the condition of the pipes, and it's if the pipes are a mess and we have to replace them all, it would behoove us to think about alternates to a pipe, but we don't have any alternates to a pipe here. I'm just curious. Thank you.
Well, as Dave and I discussed earlier tonight, there are places in California where there's no effluent. That's because they take all their effluent and put it back in the head end of their drinking water system. And we're not ready for that here in Ontario yet, I don't think. And we're not nearly as starved for water. But I would suggest the other consideration is I think we normally see effluent treated as a liability. And I'm not saying it's an asset in this case, but I think there are places in Ontario where it is treated to a very high level of quality, where it's still seen as a liability, where it can be an asset to the ecology of the stream. We have rivers in Ontario that are really small in the summer, and if they get a continuous flow of high quality effluent at a reasonable temperature, places like I've worked at in Shelburne, Upper Credit River in the Orangeville sewage plant. Upper Credit River is probably 90% effluent downstream of Orangeville in the summer. I'm not saying it's a total asset, but you could argue the river might be worse off without the water in some cases, especially if we're really entering a cycle of drier, hotter summers associated with climate change. In some cases, these effluents are probably a net plus for the water they go into.
Councillor Rich?
Thank you for your deputation, Jeff. I just have two quick questions. So from your deputation, I understand that it's impossible that there would be any odor in the discharge of the effluent?
I'm not going to say impossible. I would say unlikely.
Unlikely?
Yeah.
Because that was one of the things that when I was doing campaigning that a few people in that neighborhood certainly spoke about. So I was trying to eliminate possibilities first and foremost. Secondly, we had a deputation earlier about fecal matter in the river.
Yes.
During a high outflow time, is there any possibility for fecal matter to be coming out of that plant and going into the river? There's to me, a little bit of a debate about whether or not farms are able to get that into the outflow because we've had a significant decrease in the number of livestock. Yeah, it seems as though the amount of E. coli in the water has come up.
I think it's. I don't think you'll find even the most pristine trout stream in Grey County being zero E. coli counts. Most of our natural waterways have E. coli. The swimming standard in Ontario is 100 counts per 100 mils. So we've all heard about Sauble Beach. You've mentioned some closures here in Saugeen Shores, but the health unit sort of arbitrarily said we're concerned if it's over 100. You never hear about the days it's 90 or the days it's 80 or the days it's 50. But most of our rivers always run with a background level of E. coli, probably even the good ones, 20 to 80. And the effluent from treatment plants that have properly designed UV treatment systems are typically well under 20 and often less than 5. And that is the case for Port Elgin. E. coli counts in Mill Creek are higher than the effluent. So I think that's one thing I can say on the stack of Bibles is I think E. coli from your effluent is not your concern. The old issues of phosphorus enrichment are sort of the major issue on the table here.
Fair enough, thank you. I was just trying to, again, looking down the road and trying to figure out how we're going to manage our beaches in the future and how we're going to discern where fecal matter or E. coli is coming from. It's good to have you here today.
It's a tough investigation to track it down.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Jeff. And I think it's important to note with regard to what Councillor Rich was just saying and others is that, I think I have to point out that in Ontario and in Saugeen Shores, we run some of the most advanced equipment in terms of treating this material in the world, and we do the best job of anyone just about anywhere. And you only have to look at the statistics and data that we get from all sorts of sources. We're doing source water protection. We're doing, we're studying the surface water in the rivers. We're looking at all this stuff, and Dave brought a glass of the effluent just in the back room there. It looks really clear, quite nice. You can drink it at your own risk, but that's what they're drinking in California, so I guess it'd be all right.
Well, they're retreating it in California to drinking water standards, yeah.
But anyway, I think it's just important to note that right off the bat, and we have a good system. And I do have a couple of questions though, about what you raised there. A few of my questions have been answered, but one is with regard to the scale of the problem of getting to the pipe that we have now between Mill Creek and Saugeen River. I just wonder, can you get into some detail? I mean, you say it's a problem for us to get there to service. How big a problem is it? What are the difficulties or what are the obstacles to getting to that pipe to service it if we should need to?
Well, as I know, there is no public road allowance to it. If it broke tomorrow with 3 feet of snow out there, I don't know how you'd actually get equipment to the site. If it happens when the ground is wet or flooded in the spring, and the landowners would know better than I would, but I wouldn't be surprised. There are cases when there's 1 or 2 feet of water almost through that whole area because the river's in flood and the floodplain is inundated with water. I just don't know how you would do it.
Would it to get to the location at the moment, would it require moving machinery through the creek? Like, do you have to
Yeah,
cross the creek there somewhere?
Well, or you'd have to come in from the south. So you'd come in, you cross over the river on, what's the road here at the south end of town? Over toward, now you're over toward where the golf course is, and you have to head north.
Yeah, so you have to cross a
private property.
bunch of private property and or come from where we are and have to get messing around in the creek or all that. So it's very difficult. It's a high level of difficulty as well.
Yeah, and it's not just easy to cross that creek. If you ever go down there, it's Milk Creek's in its own little mini valley once you get to it.
Yeah.
So you drop down the bank about 5 feet. The river's 3 feet deep and up the other side. So it's not just like this easy gravel runway you run down, go through the water 8 inches deep and up the other side.
The bigger hurdle would be getting the regulatory approvals necessary to drive
And there's
through the creek.
a thick forest now in a lot of those areas. It's tough sledding.
So okay, well that's an issue with that element. And the other question I had was you mentioned that the issues with phosphorus enrichment in Mill Creek are mitigated, or that MOE sees them as being mitigated due to the length of the creek. And I just wonder why is phosphorus enrichment why is it less of an issue that there's phosphorus enrichment taking place because the creek is short from the outfall to the mouth of the Saugeen?
Well, I think they feel that you're only going to adversely impact a fairly short section of the river. So in terms of its total watershed area, you're just impacting the very lower end of it. I'm not saying that's a great excuse, but that's their pragmatic position on it.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Mayette again.
Yes, thank you again, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple other things came to mind, and with regards to the water quality and what made me think of it was Vice Deputy Mayor Huber questions about can we do a better job. Mm-hmm. I think actually the opposite is the case here, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the water is treated to such a high level that it's actually a lot cleaner than the water coming down the creek. It's fairly pure and low. You said E. coli levels are very low, with the exception of perhaps the phosphorus.
Phosphorus is the big one.
Phosphorus being the key that wouldn't naturally be occurring. But I know from our experience with water treatment at the nuclear plant is you can't just discharge water because it's really clean. If it can't support life on its own, fish life on its own, like there's situations where demineralized water, if you spill it, it's a reportable spill. It's too clean for the lake, so to speak. So that's one thing. And the other thing is with the fish. I realize there's only about a kilometer of river down below there, but I do know for a fact that muskie will traverse up that river, and then what happens is in my section of river, which is about 4 kilometers up the river, is they get up into some deep sections, and then the water recedes after the spring, and then they're caught up there all summer because and that's the ones that we catch in the summertime, and they're resident for that period of time until the fall comes and they can get back down, right? Same goes for the we call them red fin suckers, but they're horse suckers. They're called horse suckers. They come up by the thousands, and then as the water recedes, a bunch of them get stuck behind, and that luckily enough provides food for the muskies that are stuck up there as well. So there is a transient, and I would hate to think that the water quality, even though it may be improved water quality, would somehow deter these fish from whether it's an annual or incidental migration. But the migration does occur. I've witnessed it because I go back there in the springtime and seen them coming up. Right? So it's not just a kilometer, it's a long stretch of river that is affected by this, potentially.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say I don't think effluent in the spring, April, May, June, for when you still have fairly robust flows in Mill Creek, you have your effluent, I don't think that would deter those upstream migration of muskie when you've got a good background flow. Mm-hmm. These concerns about phosphorus enrichment really take hold once the river drops.
Yeah. I stand to be convinced otherwise, but I just wanted to admit it. Let it be known. And with regards to the access to the land, we do have one of the landowners here whose land that we would cross. You would never forge the Mill Creek to get there. That would just be crazy. Here, it's a deep valley, and the way that they got in there in the first place was across the Taties farm. So there is, and you probably get better access to it on a day like today because the ground's frozen and you can use machines on top of it. There's going to be a period in the spring when the flood conditions occur when you're not going to get in there, but probably for the balance of the year. And Grant over here would be able to tell you better because he grew up on that land, so he where the soft spots are. I'm sure he may have made a few of them himself. So that's all I had to say.
Thanks, Dave. I guess thanks very much, Jeff. A lot of information. I think perhaps for everyone here that it might be worthwhile to Stuart or Jeff to just tell us what the next steps are, and if anybody wants additional input or access to additional information that we have on this particular file, where they can get it. And
okay. The next normal step is the report is finalized, and it's there's advertisements placed in the paper and sent to everybody on our distribution list. Which includes a number of the people that provided comments, that the report is now on the formal 30-day review period. And it would be unusual for council to accept the report until the 30 days are up and you consider what comments you have. So the public's had one chance to provide comments following the public meeting. The formal 30-day comment period is still to come and would theoretically come fairly shortly if we were to finalize the project file report as it stands.
thanks very much.
Okay.
The next item on the agenda is the staff report. It has to do with it's a Community Services, Parks and Recreation staff report, and it has to do with the termination of an agreement for a billboard, and our Director of Community Services, Jane Jagielowski, will present.
Thank you. In 2014, members of the Downtown Revitalization Advisory Committee, known as DRAC, asked staff to review the status of the existing billboard signs located in Southampton. There are currently 7 billboard signs in Southampton, but only one of them is on municipal lands. That sign is erected on Highway 21, and it's 50 meters south of Peel Street on the west side of the highway. Billboard signs are not permitted in the town's current sign bylaw, and those existing today have been grandfathered status that would allow them to continue as constructed until they are removed. Members of DRAC identified the issues of aesthetics of the billboards along Highway 21, as well as the first impression it has to visitors, and suggest that steps be taken, where possible, to remove them. The town of Southampton entered into an agreement with Mediacom Inc. in 1998, which subsequently changed to CBS and now to Outfront Media. At that time, the agreement was for 5 years with an automatic right of renewal on a year-to-year basis. As the landlord, the town has the right to discontinue the agreement if it so chooses. The other similar signs located on private property will require the voluntary cooperation of the landowners on which they are located if they are to be removed in the future. Staff is seeking approval to proceed with the termination of the existing agreement and will work with the company to have the sign removed from our property. And the financial impact is a negative impact of $1,544.
Thank you, Jane. And the recommendation is that the town provide notice to the Outfront Media that it wishes to exercise the termination clause in the agreement for the billboard located on municipal lands along Highway 21, 50 meters south of Peel Street on the west side, and that the sign be removed as soon as possible. Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Just for clarification, Jane, this is the one that's sort of across from Enchanted Fusion, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. This is good. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
First, I just want to say thank you to the Director of Community Services for bringing this forward. I know it was a strong desire from the members of DRAC from Southampton to see us move on this billboard and all the others, although this is the only one we can move on with such ease. And hopefully, with the help of the Southampton VIA, we can work on solutions to some of the other ones over time. And I know that'll be something that DRAC will, I'm sure, be revisiting when and if it is restruck. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. No further comments. All in favor of the recommendation? Opposed, if any? That's carried. The next item on the agenda then is another Community Services, Parks and Recreation staff report, and it has to do with the Port Elgin Tourist Association lease agreement. And again, our Director of Community Services, Jane Jagielowski, will present.
The Port Elgin Tourist Association continues to play a significant role in the promotion and sustainability of the Port Elgin waterfront. The town of Saugeen Shores has always worked well and collaboratively with the Port Elgin Tourist Association. In 2010, the association purchased 40 garbage barrels to improve the aesthetics of the Port Elgin Main Beach and Gobles Grove Beach, and they continue to provide features and resources that enhance the waterfront. Staff have met with John Miller, President of the Tourist Association, regarding the recent drawings completed for the waterfront. The association looks forward to the development of the waterfront master plan and how we can work together to enhancing it. The agreement indicates the right to renegotiate or terminate the agreement by either party if required. And the Port Elgin Tourist Association provides a yearly contribution of $5,000 towards beach improvements.
Thank you, Jane. And the recommendation is that the lease agreement between the town of Saugeen Shores and the Port Elgin Tourist Association be renewed for a further 5 years with an expiry date of February the 28th, 2019. Questions or comments? Councillor Myatt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mrs. Jagielowski, the $5,000 that they provide, does that go? Is it earmarked for any one particular beach improvement, or does it just go into the general beach budget?
Currently goes into reserve, and it's typically what's happened if that there's a potential project that's approaching, we'll have a discussion with them to determine if that's something that they'd like to put the money towards. I neglected to say that in the past they have helped us with some of the aesthetics around the Green Street washroom, and we did that several years ago as well. So those are mutual agreements, I'll say, that we have conversations ahead of time if there is a project earmarked for that money.
So if there was, say, a beach groomer or something like that they may wish to contribute to?
They could have those conversations if that's what they wish to contribute towards.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you. And just before I get to my real point, on a humorous note, I happened to catch a little bit of a Family Feud episode before I came, and the question was, why do men grow beards? John Miller's in the back with quite a big beard. I'll share with you afterwards the top 8 answers. Anyway, I wanted to ask Jane, since we haven't yet moved very far along with allocating some funds for the waterfront and determining what might be included in that first attempt to realize some goals down there, has discussion occurred that should there be some opportunity to in some ways reconstruct the parking area by moving fences around? All of that's been sort of discussed as there might be some potential changes even this summer that would not take away, but would perhaps just disrupt or change the flow of their operation midstream. All of that's been sort of laid out as a possibility, correct?
We don't anticipate that there'll be any cosmetic or any infrastructure changes that's going to impede their operations this summer. We continue to have regular conversations, John and I, on a regular basis. There's certainly not a tremendous amount of members in the tourist associations, which makes it somewhat easier, I'll say, on John's behalf to have those conversations with their committee. So at this point, I don't see that there's going to be any changes to how their functions, what we provide for them this summer. That answers your question.
Any further questions? If not, then all in favor of the recommendation. Opposed, if any, that's carried. The next item on the agenda is there's a number 8 items there under communications for petitions or petitions for committee of the whole information. There's 8 of them there. If anybody has any comment, we'll start with Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
I'm going to jump right down to number 8 on the list about the consultation on the default speed limit. There's been a little bit of press from Toronto newspapers about this. We already have a 40-kilometer speed limit in Southampton, and so I would encourage us to respond. One of the option number 4 on their list basically suggests that that we would like to have the ability to make decisions within our own jurisdiction, and I think that that's a good message to convey to the ministry. So it just lets us establish default speeds in different directions depending upon potentially particular needs in neighborhoods or something like that. So I would recommend that we respond and support option number 4.
I guess the question for clarity, would you want that from staff, or do you want that under the mayor's signature, or do you want to do it individually? You can do it yourself and input to it.
Well, the letter was requesting a municipal response. So
Okay.
I guess, we don't have a 50-kilometer default. We already have 40 in certain areas. I guess I'm just saying that this is one of the few chances we get to say to the province, we'd like to control our own community. So, that option sort of sets
Okay.
up that's what we would prefer.
Well, we can do that then. Councillor Grace?
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber already said what I was going to say. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
I just wanted to ask the question in relation to that, because point number 4, and I made this would be best directed to the Director of Public Works. Point number 4 there says, through you, Mr. Mayor, that legislative change is required to permit municipalities to set different default speed limits, but we have a different default speed limit in Southampton. Could you clarify, Stuart, do you know, what does that mean? Do you know what that means? Or does, no? I'll take your silence to mean he doesn't know what it means. So I just think that it would be interesting to ask some questions around that. I would be interested in some clarification maybe as to whether we even require the legislative change that they're suggesting, or what they're saying there. I don't know how we could have a different speed limit if it's not in compliance with. I don't know. Anyway, that's just a point I'm asking.
Either way, I think we end up with what we want, right? Really?
Well, we do. I'm kind of not sure what they're getting at here. Anyway, that's just.
It shouldn't surprise you.
No, it doesn't surprise me.
Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With number 3, the SMART annual report. I don't suppose it's possible to get it now, but maybe we could ask for it for this future year. But I wondered if we could get categories on where we're driving people to. Like categories I would think of are to a medical appointment, to get groceries, to go to the bank, to go to a pharmacy or other. Like, it just seems like it's out there and everybody's taking advantage of this and lots of them, but we don't know where they're going. Is it all within Saugeen Shores, or can a Saugeen Shores resident ask for this transportation network to take them somewhere else?
Yes, they can, and many for medical reasons. I can tell. They have some general. We can have the chair come. Roger come. He doesn't track that specifically about whether it's medical or whether that I know of. I know at the board we discuss those types of things, but he doesn't. He gets total rides and lengths. But I think it would be probably worthwhile with the changes that we've seen in the board and the board changes in the service, the cost, that we could have Roger come and perhaps. A question you could ask Roger. Sure. I think he's anxious to come and explain some of what he does again. Okay, so if I guess there's 3 information reports there, and the first one is to do. And Stuart, if you want to speak to any of them, first, go ahead. I guess we can speak to the first one. Was the VIA market that started last. Yep.
Yeah, briefly. When we did pass this special event last year, Council did request a recap of the event, specifically with the concerns that we had talked about before we passed the event. So some of that was traffic, and I've put some notes in there. The cost, we came up to about just over $3,000 net cost to help with the event last year. 113 hours of staff time. We have been meeting with the BA and have a meeting set up hopefully in the next week or 2 to look at some of the start and end times, the use of the event further on in the fall, which didn't probably require road closure. So there'll likely be some changes to the upcoming application, but we will bring it back to Council for recommendation.
Thank you. Any questions on that? Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Stuart, do you know if we have any hard statistics on how much were business owners polled to see if they had experienced any upswing in business on those days? Do we know?
I did speak to the president of the BIA, and he inferred that businesses were happy with the event. They held a meeting there last week, and again, they polled their members just at the meeting, and they were all quite happy with the event. So I'm hoping this year they'll look at that a little more closely and talk to their members, and we'll see what comes out of there.
Councillor Minaj.
Thank you. So having attended their meeting, they're definitely interested in running the program again. So I would like to know when we can have, how soon we can have, before it gets buried in lots of other agenda items, your other recommendations.
That will depend on when they put the application in.
Thank you. I will prompt them to do it soon. Thank you.
The next one again is Stuart and its LED retrofit program. If you've got anything you want to say on it, Stuart, or if anybody's got any questions, Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I was interested to see the second last sentence there, that the town and the CRU, our company, have been attempting to work with Westario Power on the matter to get the billing changed and have had little success to date. So I wondered if it's time for us to call in our representative of the Westario Power and have him explain what the holdup, why is there a holdup, or what does he need from us, or what can we do about it, if anything. And then, as an extension thought, if you give me just one little more, I was wondering if we could have any of our major utilities or corporations that our residents do business with come in and tell us the state of affairs as they see it, like BMTS, like Eastlink, like Union Gas, Bell, Grey Bruce Regional Health Services. Any of those people, maybe they could come in and say, you know, all's well in Saugeen Shores, and that would be it. But an opportunity to meet with them. Thank you.
I think Stuart's got an answer to your first question.
Although I can't comment on why this has taken so long, I am happy to report that we finally arranged a meeting for this Thursday with Westario and our contractor, who incidentally is also an LDC, a subsidiary of an LDC, so they're quite familiar with how this billing issue works. So they're meeting us, and we're all going to Walkerton to try to hash this out. So hopefully we'll have some better news coming weeks.
And I guess the answer to your second, if you've got specifically ones, from time to time they do come on their own, but we can ask specifically if there's a specific one or all of those, make a list, and we can request them. Doesn't mean that they will come, but they may.
Year of our 4-year term.
Sure.
Thank you.
And the final information report. Oh, sorry, Deputy Mayor.
I wanted to ask a question with regard to with the change that's been put into it through replacing all the fiberglass poles and top hat assemblies. This does that complete the long-running pole trans conversions that went on forever? Am I understanding that correctly? That once this is complete, that is complete, or am I misunderstanding that?
So this has nothing to do with pole trans.
Okay.
Pole trans work is exclusively with Westario Power. They've invested a significant amount of money doing that in Saugeen Shores in the last few years. There's still a number left. They're doing some small work this year, but the replacement of the fiberglass poles has nothing to do with the pole trans.
Can I ask then, Mr. Mayor, is there a relationship, or are we changing fixtures on poles that will require later on updating through the pole trans conversion? Are we making those updates on those poles that are scheduled for removal?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And the final information report again is going to tender for the 2015 capital projects, and maybe you want to speak to it, Stuart. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, and there is always an advantage when we are the first tenders or the first people to go to tender, because you invariably get more competitive prices when people aren't already booked up. And if you wait longer, then the prices generally go up. So, and it's clear that these are all conditional on approval of the capital budget. Any questions on that? If not, then that's the end of my agenda, and I'll start, go to council. We'll start tonight with Councillor Mayat.
I have nothing to add tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Grace.
Yes, I just want to say briefly, Mr. Mayor, that over the last couple of years I've had the opportunity to be a sub for the GC Houston Breakfast Program, and I started a little section again now for the month of February. And just given the talk about GC Houston being in kind of a precarious position, I'm just always so impressed with the staff and students at that school, and it's a real delight to work there. Last Thursday, Principal Russell came in his hockey garb and had just spent time with the kids early morning hockey, and came in to make sure that they got a good breakfast before they went to classes. So I just want us to, I know we all appreciate the school, and I wanted to share that. Thank you.
Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one thing. I attended the BIA AGM on our behalf, and I'd like to let you know that the members there were extremely excited with the preliminary news that some light fixtures seemingly will be approved, that maybe some gateway signs for Port Elgin will be approved, and it's energizing the group, and they're taking on some additional new projects that we should see before us. Thank you.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
I have nothing. Thank you.
Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For anybody that was in town the past weekend, you noticed that the town was abuzz with several hundred young girls. Minor hockey hosted their annual Girls Sea-Level Silver Stick with over 40 teams in 7 different divisions. Although none of our teams were victorious, they all represented our town well. This past Friday, the Winterhawks began their playoff run against Mapleton Minto, and every year the Rotary Club holds its annual Winterama Snoworama, and as has happened the last few years, they've done a fundraising drive at the game, and this year they collected over $500 to go towards Winterama. And finally, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to inform Council that at our next meeting, I'll be bringing forward a motion to initiate the Recreation Master Plan immediately rather than waiting until next year. As talk increases about the proposed pool, I feel that it is prudent and in the best interest of the community that we look at all aspects of recreation now rather than later and create a plan that will be implemented now rather than put off until later. A plan that is modern, up to date, and meets the need of our community now and for many years to come. And that's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rich.
Tomorrow I head down to Hamilton to go to the Economic Development Conference, and hopefully I'll be able to bring back information that's useful for all of us and get our money's worth out of it, and maybe be useful towards a future Economic Development Committee. As well, I'm going to go to the water thing next Thursday. I can't remember what it's called anymore with Nancy. Pardon me? Yeah, Source Water. What is it, 2 hours that course? I'm excited to see what they have to offer. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, a series of meetings over the last couple of weeks with the Conservation Authority and the BIA meeting I was at, as well as a meeting with representatives of the Stop Wind Turbine Action Group to hear updates on what they're doing, and meetings also with Mr. Wepler, who was here tonight, and others. And so it's been a busy couple of weeks, but this week is going to be a good week because I'm judging 2 public speaking competitions, one at Northport and one at Saugeen Central, so I'm looking forward to that. That's pretty well the highlight of my year every year, so I look forward to that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I have nothing, so we'll take motions to adjourn. Don and John, all in favor? So we're adjourned, and let's start again at 9:30.